All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. As I was Brendan back on solo duty, so I'm bringing the besties in. We got Ollie and Sam, and gentlemen, we're doing a little bit of a ones to watch from the Euros, right? So as we all know, every major tournament, there's a standout player, someone who finally maybe is at a small club, gets in the limelight of a big international tournament, and gets a move. So we're going to highlight some of these. Sam, the summer of research never stops for you, now does it?
Yeah, I'm still grateful. I mean, this summer seems peaceful compared to the first two. So I'm counting my stars and saying, okay, at least I'm getting healthy sleep and the Euros is on, so people are distracted. And we've already had a year we go. So not at all fussed by it. I was ahead of the curve this time, got my tape ready, notes ready and ready to go. So yeah, hard times teach you a lot of things, Brandon. So yeah, I think I'm well prepped this time around.
All right, well, fair enough. Ollie, no shortage of scouting reports from you either. I'm excited. I think this is going to be, look, players that I think we've maybe heard of, and then obviously some that we maybe haven't heard of as well, which is, I think, always fun. We can turn the listeners on to new players.
Yeah, definitely. A few they would have heard of, and a few they maybe haven't, or haven't thought about in depth. So yeah, let's get into it.
All right. Well, hey, as always, huge shout outs to those listeners of you who dropped the 5-star reviews. We love our community. And if you haven't dropped one, do it. It really helps us. Also, subscribe on YouTube. Check it out. Jake is doing amazing work there. A lot of momentum, continuing to drive on the road to 50K. And if you want a written version of awesome stuff we do, Sam leading the charge there in the weekly newsletter, the London is Blue Dispatch, free every week. And then for a couple bucks, you can join the best Chelsea community around on our Discord server. Gentlemen, Sam, you already alluded to it. We have the Here We Go, and that's with Guiu, a 2006 born striker. That is when I graduated high school, and that is where we're at in this world right now. A striker, 6 million euro release clause from Barca. What do we got going on here, Sam, besides a good kit edit on this photo?
I'm sorry, I'm a little dizzy after hearing you graduated in 2006. Jesus.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
That just puts into perspective how young this guy is. I mean, wow. But yeah, I mean, ageist jokes apart, I would say, yeah, he's been on a lot of people's scouting reports. I would say like a lot of publications, a lot of portals have pointed him out as one to watch. The Guardian and Goal both do separate lists in terms of the next generation of players you need to watch. And I think he featured on both those lists in terms of the strikers from La Masia, who you definitely have to keep an eye on. Um, I would say that the first time I saw him play was in the under 17 Euros last year, when a lot of interesting talents were popping up all over the place. And Lamine Yamal was also there. So obviously a lot of, motivation to watch those guys who are going to make the jump very quickly. He ended up as the top scorer in the edition, along with Lamine Yamal with 4 goals. And Dortmund's Paris Brunner was also there at the top of the charts. So that's where I would say a little bit of the recognition happened. He was already well known in Barcelona circles, and he's arguably one of, like, part of, I would say, Barcelona's most exciting generation since when we know those household names. So if you look at them now, there's a lot of excitement in terms of Xavi coming in, giving all these youth potential sort of like a little bit of a reign to go out and express themselves. So obviously we know Pedri, Gavi, Pau Kubarsi is actually 2007 born, so he's younger than Guiu, and he's come into the first team. Hector Fort, who's played extensively with Marc Guiu, is also there. So lots of talent, and he's obviously one of those guys. He made his debut for Barca officially in a game versus Athletic Bilbao and scored with his second touch, which pretty much tells you what kind of a guy he is. He's also sort of, I would say, getting a lot of interest because he's not a conventional Barcelona slash Spanish nine. He's not a drop deep, link up, pass to me and I shall pass to you kind of nine. He's more about pushing that last line, being in the box for headers. When I watched his youth games, he's extremely good in the air, and he's very physical. So loves running the channels, can do a little bit of everything. But obviously, at his age, turning 18 in January is still a long way to go. But I would absolutely love to know Ollie's thoughts here as well, because he's seen a couple of the tape from his Spain as well as his Barcelona games. So, any thoughts, Ollie? How excited are you with the signing, and where do you project him going in the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one in terms of knowing how I feel about the signing right now. I mean, he's coming in, and there are reports that maybe he's not even going out on loan. Maybe he might stay around the first team. He might, as part of the signing on, he might come with us on the US tour, and that is a step that I didn't really consider. I have to be honest. I think he is a power forward profile. He's great in the air. He's good at hold up, and as you say, that's not a traditional Barca nine at all. They tend to prefer false nines since Guardiola. So yeah, it's a really interesting one. I would say that this is also a really sore one for Barcelona. They put in a 6 million release clause, thinking that Euros, that is, thinking that it wouldn't be exercised at any point because he'd just sign on and they would add one of their customary, 500 million euro release clauses on one of their youngsters. So this is quite a tough one for them to take. You've already seen the Barcelona doing the classic money hungry briefing, saying that we're offering him triple the salary that they were offering him, which is kind of ludicrous when you think about it. 'Cause he was only on 1,500 a week, I believe, or something like that, 1.9 a week. So yeah, it's all a bit silly, to be honest. But yeah, a really interesting profile. I wouldn't consider him as Nico's backup right now. I would be a bit concerned if the club considered him ready for that. As you say, there is the highlight reel moment of him coming on and scoring with his second touch, and the lovely kind of celebrations after that. And Barcelona fans were clipping that up and saying like betrayal after the reports have come out, right? So yeah, it's a really interesting one to watch.
Not a lot of appearances, obviously the 3, for this season for Barcelona. So I'm trying to always like piece where he would go, and he has this big strong chest. He's happy to be physical, to your guys' point, right? Like watching the highlights clipped on social. So he definitely feels like he could, do well, but at the end of the day, still a kid, still gonna have a lot to figure out. Even less experience than Nico Jackson. So this is going to be interesting, right? It's where does he go within the Chelsea ecosystem? Is it the dev squad? Is it with the first team? But then is it just developing him all summer? You're probably not going to send him on loan right away. Again, this is a little bit more insight in the sporting directors and where we're going to go, but I am intrigued to kind of see how this plays out and where he fits in because it's not a lot of money. It's clearly one for the future. How do they get him ready for the future is always the multi-million-dollar question that they're gonna have to figure out. But yeah, another early here we go. So this could potentially be the second signing. It's not done. It just meant that Chelsea officially triggered the release clause. He's got the verbal agreement in place with his agents. Now they need to have the formal steps finished out this week. So more to come. But Fabrizio, here we going. It. Speaking of staying on the striker topic,
Brandon,
Sam. Yep.
yeah, Brandon, just 2 seconds before sort of like just adding to Ollie's point before we move on to the next player. But when I was watching the video, one of the games that he started was against I think Malaga or Granada. I think it was Malaga, and Robert Lewandowski was on the bench. And there were multiple moments where he tried to do his thing, where he was going up against centre backs and trying to get into heading positions, and the physicality wasn't there in terms of just realizing that you're now playing from boys to now men. And there were multiple attacking free kicks where he tried to rush into the near post and was just easily held back. So I would say, like, when people ask me, is he ready? My instant answer is to say no. And to give you a point in terms of where he is, I would say he's probably very close to what Carney Chukwuemeka was when he came to the club. You could see he's, an outlier at youth level where he's exceptional, but he's somewhere between those two phases because the jump from youth level to senior football is absolutely humongous. So maybe the plan here would be to do something, and I'm just going from something that I heard about the Andre Santos interview that happened with, I think, Globo earlier this week. And Ollie was kind enough to send me a link of that. And he said, look, the sporting directors and the club actually wanted me to stay. But I saw Caicedo, I saw Enzo, I saw Lavi, and I wanted to go play. So maybe that acclimatization period is something that happens at home, where you're sort of in and around the club, you're tested, given maybe 1,000 minutes. We all know that you're going to be playing around 65, 70 games next season. So even if he gets 1,500 minutes in the Conference League, and he already has, a Champions League goal to his name. So, he's shown that he can perform at that level. So maybe like 2 tiers down, if you give him regular starting games when you're rotating Nico Jackson, what happens over a year? I think that's how the change will happen. He's not ready, like Ollie said, and you're perfectly on the spot in terms of saying maybe at 18, super young. He is all strikers take about 2, 3 years to mature. We've seen that with Nico Jackson, but I guess that's going to be the pathway. Let him get acclimatized to the physicality of the Premier League. Let it not come as a culture shock when he just drops in and is penciled in as Nico Jackson's backup. Give him minutes. He will have loads of them next season and see where it goes from there.
Yeah,
Maybe film the Broya role.
Yeah, exactly. Just to finish this up, I think it's really interesting to think about what this means for the like dev squad, right? Because there's discussion around, will he be in the first team? Is he going to have a dual role in terms of the first team squad? Maybe get some European minutes, but mainly play in the academy. I mean, what does that mean for people like Donnell, Manili, Jimmy J Morgan, Leo Castledine, right? Because there are kind of there's a scarcity of international loan spots, and they need to be considered as well. So yeah, I think I've been told that it's a separate deal to any other striker that comes in. But then again, like, you're putting another body in front of these players, right? So we have to be really careful about planning with them.
All right. So keeping on that striker theme, though, is Jonathan David from Lille, a Canadian, no less. Didn't he leave Arsenal kind of high profile a couple seasons ago? Which striker was that? Oh, Balogun. Duh, the American, the other North American. Yeah. So anyways, Jonathan David, not the first time. I don't think we've been linked with him. 24 years old, playing in 2,600 minutes in league. Pretty good radar, but Sam, kind of the brief synopsis on him. I don't think we're going to be the only one looking at him, correct?
So he's one of those players that gets linked to every single top club in Europe every single transfer season. And it's a curious one because you tend to look at his record, and it is quite phenomenal in terms of his goals. I think he has 84 goals for Lille in 4 seasons. That's like 21 a season on average. And then you're thinking, why doesn't any club take a gamble on him? And there have been a multitude of reasons. Obviously, when he was on a healthy contract, it would have cost a pretty penny. But there are also sort of like big red flags. And it's come to a point now where his contract expires in 2025. And the reported fees, in terms of on the articles that we see floating around from reputable sources, say that it could be somewhere between 25 to 30. And 30 million euros is what they paid Ghent for his signature when he came in as Victor Osimhen's replacement. So now it's sort of like a low risk, high reward deal, which is why suddenly there's a lot of flurry. He's proven in a top league. Manchester United, West Ham, us are in the mix. So it'll be interesting to see what the decision is. But I have a lot of concerns. I'd love to hear Ollie's viewpoint in terms of his fit in the Premier League and at the club. But at this price, you're not going to get this much experience of somebody who's proven at league on level, which is a very good league. So that's going to be the question.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the caveat with Jonathan David, as you say, of like how long he's been considered a kind of top level striker, but just below that top level. I mean, I remember when we were linked with him coming out of Ghent in 2018, before he made the move to Lille in 2020, and yeah, it was very similar, ironically, to like a Guiu, right, where you were thinking about taking a gamble on a young player. coming through from the Belgian league as it was then, and there were kind of some parallels drawn with a young Romelu Lukaku and how he dominated that league as well. And I think that's what led to us not really going for him. And I think Spurs also didn't take that offer either to go in for him at the same time. So yeah, it's funny how it kind of cycles back to this. But the profile now you draw to him is almost like, I mean, he's only 24, right? So you're still thinking of him in terms of he does have an ability to grow, but he has had a kind of plateauing, right, in his development. It's not really clear what the top level of his game would be, and coming to a tougher league than Liga, and admittedly, the Premier League is chaos ball at the moment, where it may suit him, but he is likely to not get the same amount of chances as he would in Liga, right? So yeah, I think it's a tough one. I would have some issues buying him in as like a switch up for Nico, because I don't really see them as the same profile. I think he'd have issues hanging onto the ball a lot in the Premier League, and I do have some kind of issues with him aerially as well. So yeah, I think there's lots to consider with Jonathan David, that maybe reasons to miss out on him, even though the price is reduced. There might be a reason for it.
I mean,
Yeah,
at
absolutely.
least
I
we're
think
looking into strikers. That's half the battle with this group, right? We know we need goals. I think saying we're just looking at weird places, but anyways, what were you going to continue on with?
no. I mean, again, it just seems like a summer sale sort of thing where you're looking at value deals and saying that, what's a very good offer that you just can't pass up. And that's where I would say Jonathan David is, like, in terms of territory. His finishing is really good. If I were to chart out his strengths, the fact that he finishes with both feet and he's comfortable doing it from either side, the left or the right, very, very good. He's also just in 5 seasons, in 5 senior seasons in Europe, there's only one season where he's underperformed on his non-penalty expected goals. All of the other times he's been over. So he's a reliable finisher and somebody who, takes his chances and makes sure that he's doing the stuff inside the box. But like Ollie points out, he's 5'9". He's horrible in the air. In terms of physicality, I would ask the same questions of a lot of multiple top level strikers, say like a Lautaro Martinez, in terms of making the transition to the Premier League, saying how good will you hold up the ball when you've got PL centre backs, throwing you around like a rag doll. And that's my biggest issue with David. He's not physically good and just can't do anything with crosses. His heading is very poor. So he still gets like headed goals, but like his checked heading under severe pressure is not good. So that's going to be like the coin flip. Do you want to wait for the Sheshko and, if he has a breakout season, true breakout season, then having to shell out 80 million for him next season? Or do you just take this opportunity and somebody that sort of gives you 20 goals a season? Are you going to just go there and take the gamble and see how it plays out?
Look, it's not enticing yet. I just think it's still one step. But the sporting directors like trying to sneak people in, maybe a season or two before they're kind of ready. But again, with the amount of goal chances we created last season and goals we did not score, can you really take another gamble? I don't know. But we're gonna take a break there. When we get back, going into defender, looking at more attackers, much more to come. Thank you to the sponsors, and we'll be right back. Okay, so center back, left back, Ricardo Calafiori, Ollie, is the next one on our list. 22-year-old at Bologna, playing in the Euros. So obviously, again, getting a big moment in the spotlight. What have you pulled up on Ricardo?
Yeah, so I've watched him a while. I'd like brief bio on him. He broke through at Roma, suffered a bad ACL in the youth league. Came back from that, broke into the senior team, scored a worldie, and then was involved in like arguably Roma's most humiliating defeat of the last few years in the 6-1 to Bodo Glimt. And then after that was basically farmed out to Genoa. And after that, I think a lot of Serie A watchers just sort of thought, well, that's going to be the end of his kind of Serie A career, right? But he went off to Basel. They took a chance on him, and during that season, out in Switzerland, they tried him in this kind of weird hybrid centre back role. So he has an education as a left back, a kind of marauding left back. Think kind of Marcus Alonso maybe, like big guy left back. Right, he's 6'2", very physical, has a shot on him, can deliver a cross. But he was given this kind of centre back hybrid role whereby he could break the press. He could be the free man who kind of moves into midfield, and that sparked Thiago Motta's interest at Bologna. And in this kind of amazing season for Bologna, where they've reached the Champions League, he was one of the stars of that team. He only scored in his last game of the season against Juve. He scored twice against them, and in that game, you saw two perfect examples, really, of what is so good about his game. Really, is that he has that kind of unexpected threat from centre back. He carries the game forward. He's a good progressor of the ball. He's great in the air. He's also a very aggressive defender, so he plays front foot. He can replace your centre mid. So there's some really interesting profiles in there. But I would say, and Football Twitter calls him Aura Man because I think he's essentially got that long hair, hairband like a Nesta or a Maldini, but I don't see his game like that at all. I wouldn't say his favorite part of football is defending, and I think actually in the transition to centre back, you've seen a few issues in terms of body shape, especially on the turn. And actually, in the Euros, you saw an own goal that was perhaps unlucky, but also down to body shape and the fact that as a left back, you're usually past the far post. You don't turn that into your own net. As centre back, there's that adaptation period, and I think when you're thinking about bringing in a profile like him to a Chelsea, for instance, we'd need a Levi inside him, like he has for Bastoni for Italy, who is a far superior defender in my opinion, but also untouchable because he's never going to leave Inter. So you're looking at a profile that can carry that threat by inverting into centre back, but also taking it forward and carrying it through midfield. And we saw that perfectly as we record yesterday, when he got the 98th minute assist for Italy for Zaccagni. So, and that was down to him driving as the free man through midfield from centre back and laying it off. So that right there was a kind of game breaking moment for Italy, and is kind of sums up what's best about him.
I mean, it sounds like a good fit from Maresca. I just think back to height as well, right, Ollie? And then that was an issue. We were pushing Levi and some things like that. So it definitely gives some different angles. Sam, what about you from your perspective? And I mean, I keep forgetting we have to like look at players now with this new lens as well. It's like, oh yeah, new manager, new system. Here we go.
Yeah, I think Ollie just sort of summed it up perfectly, to be honest. And look at his aerial percentage at the Euros. I mean, he's playing with some top players, and his duel percentage, success percentage is 78%, which is saying something. And like Ollie mentioned, again, he's had a very good season at Bologna, and Bologna themselves have had somewhat of a revolution with Thiago Motta's tactics and them being, under the microscope in terms of the next team to offer some kind of a tactical revolution in Serie A. And yeah, so the interest is there. Liverpool are looking at him. Juventus, obviously, somewhere in the middle now, they realized their opportunity to conclude a deal for the cheap is gone. At the Euros, every time he sets foot on the grass, it rises by 5 million. So that's going to be the big thing. I think he's sort of a three-way defender. He can do left back stuff. He can defend out wide. He can carry and give you progression. He can also pass through it. And obviously, he slots in supremely well as a centre back. So that's a very rare profile. Somebody who's been getting into midfield, not just receiving it, but also turning and progressing play. Sort of a rarity. And the fact that it's an Italian doing it will interest Maresca very heavily. So I think this one will be one to watch. I don't know if you have the funds to spend, but I would say left back is a priority position, perhaps even more than center forward. But I think you can make certain adjustments and get by. But With Ben Chilwell's injury issues, with Kukurea being a question mark, I think that's a iffy position. So Maresca needs to identify whether he's, again, going to get his left back to go into midfield. Is it going to be the third centre back? He needs to have his priorities clear early on in the season, and he hasn't even started work. He starts in July. So by the time he walks in, he has to be certain that this is the left back I want, and he should be in before the start of preseason. So that's going to be an interesting question whether he fits that brief or if we, go with Kukurea and see where it takes us.
The old left back, sticky position. Again, we talked about this on the last one. Gentlemen, Cucurella have such a good tournament. I think it kind of puts us in good position whether you keep or move. This could be a big piece of that. But the next one we have is Nico Williams. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ollie. I don't think this is the first time we've been linked with him. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, every time he wants a new contract, his agent links
Ah,
links him with us as about
best
99% of the
buddies.
players around the world, right? And he's got a hell of a good contract. I mean, he's the second highest player, second highest paid player at his club, I think, other than his brother. So they're onto a good thing there. So yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the player, first and foremost, very exciting, tricky winger. If we're looking at a kind of developed version of a Crescentia Somerville, maybe at a higher level, then you're looking at a player like Nico. I mean, to me, he would be much better potentially placed than the options we have in that position right now. But I'm also thinking about the development pathway of people like Tariq George as well at the same time. And can you justify the outlay that a Nico Williams would command if you don't also sell on the two wingers that are currently occupying that space if you don't trust them, right? And I think, yeah, if we're thinking of a player who's on upwards of 200,000 euros a week, like, if you say no to Elise based on that, then you absolutely have to say no to Nico Williams based on that. I think, going back to a player like Calafiori, maybe one of the upsides of missing out on an Elise is that you do have the funds potentially to offer elsewhere and to look at maybe a young bargain like a Guiu, if you want to think about him in that way, and maybe a more established player that you can really put some outlay on. But yeah, I think I don't see him coming in this window, and I think the more he plays for Spain, as as Sam was saying about Calafiori, I think his price is going up 10 million every game he plays, especially with Lamine Yamal on the other wing. So and Cuckoo actually doing a good job defending behind him. So yeah, I think I don't see Nico arriving this window, and Calafiori, I think there's going to be an absolute bun fight after the Euros are finished.
I tell you what, it's a good balanced approach, but this just goes back to why we do these pods is people are going to be hearing these names, they're going to be seeing them, the agents are going to be taking advantage of this, Sam. So it's good to kind of touch base and also like take into consideration the squad we have and who we have. You just jamming another, under 24-year-old player into the team. He is right footed. So, okay, great. Not another lefty, but, on those wages, fitting him into what we've got, you almost feel like we're kind of okay in that spot with the squad right now.
I would agree. And the one reason I'm actually looking at him is because I don't think that left wing slot is sort of secure. I don't know whether Maresca would feel confident enough going into the season, say, as Mikhailo Mudryk as his number one, left wing option. You don't know what's going to happen with Raheem Sterling. I unfortunately gave Dan a mini cardiac arrest by saying that Sterling could benefit with Maresca coming here because he's played, a similar system. But should it work out? Should it not work out? I think if you're looking at all the best left wing options in the world, he's definitely there. And I will also give a lot of people another sort of mini scare and say that I rate him higher than Rafael Leao. I think in terms of an overall sort of perspective, in terms of just defending, tracking, doing his dirty stuff, game intelligence, he's far, far better rounded than than a Rafael Leao. So you're arguably looking at one of the best in the world in that position. He's playing in what I would say is a system that could probably be emulated at Chelsea in terms of having to provide the width, having to take on 1v1, given the license to do his thing. It's what he loves. In an article by shout out Sid Lowe, by the way, he's one of the best, like he's one of my favorite journalists, football journalists, and he wrote a terrific article on Nico, and I would highly urge people to go read it. So I'm not going to quote anything and spoil anything for anybody, but um, this guy is the next gem of Spanish football. Lamine Yamal on the other wing is also somebody who's creating all kinds of rage. But these two guys are, players you don't want to come up against. They are 1v1 demons. Nico has shown that he's very comfortable going to the right flank. He sometimes sort of switches with his brother Iñaki at center forward, so he's very comfortable across the three lines and somebody who could provide a great, I don't know, like dynamism with the players that you have. And Kunku, if you play him at center forward, loves drifting left. Nico goes left to right, left goes center. So I think there's a lot of synergy if you want a fluid attack. You're not going to get many better options than him. The downside, obviously, is that Athletic Bilbao don't pay any transfer fees. So all that money goes into their wages. So he's on 250K plus. And as the joke goes, whenever there's a really good player in any academy, they call the scouts, and in Bilbao, they just call the national census and say, hey, which house, are the kids born in, and just go and pick the best ones out. So I don't think he's going to come. He's in a really good position playing with his brother for a club that means a lot to him. I don't know if people know the story, but his parents walked, on foot to cross the Sahara Desert to get to Melilla, which is a autonomous province, Spanish autonomous province in close to Morocco. And from there, they hopped the fence to get to Spain. And Spain gave them a home, and he's grown up in Bilbao. He's accepted there as family. It's the land that means everything to him. So it just seems like a one club situation for me. He only has to look at what Iñaki has achieved there in terms of the cult status, in terms of the love, and there's every bit that example in terms of emulating that at the same club. So he has no motivation to leave whatsoever. And if we didn't get Olise for wage reasons, I don't see this happening under any circumstance. So probably best to find the next best position. But this I can guarantee. I'm no Fabrizio, but not happening.
All right, all right. Well, 5 goals, 11 assists, so 16 is nothing to to wipe away and not take seriously. 31 matches played, 2200 minutes. I like fitness, and I think a lot of us do right now in health with this team. We got more players to cover, so we're going to take our last ad break. When we get back, little defending, little goalkeeping. Some might say ending on the best note. Thank you, sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right, let's keep going. And Ollie with the hipster pick here. But again, this is what the Euros can do. Milos Kerkez is on our radar, a 20-year-old young player at Bournemouth. Played over almost 1,800 minutes for them, kind of on in the defensive back line. What is catching your eye with Milos, Ollie?
Yeah, it's just I just put him in here for a couple of reasons, really. The links to the club don't seem to be going away. He always seems to be on a long list of some sort at Chelsea, which I find quite interesting. He has the ability to play left back, left wing back. Um, he likes the club because anyone who remembers on Twitter with his random Raheem Sterling selfie there, just like happy Chelsea day at one point. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a player who is absolutely not an established top level pro right now. I mean, to me, he has a lot of growing to do. And he does have several downsides right now. I would actually draw comparisons to Cucurella before his season at Getafe, where he kind of broke out before his move to Brighton, right? I think he has that kind of versatility, a bit of physicality, which I think he actually thinks he's stronger than he is, and that kind of leads into the downsides when he tends to dive in quite a lot. He's an aggressive defender, and his best aspects going forward are more kind of cutback crosses than crossing in the air, which he kind of struggles with. So yeah, he only got one assist last season, right? Um, Couple that with the fact that Bournemouth have put a really high price on him as well. There's believed to be a clause of like 45 to 50 million euros, which is kind of crazy when you consider the kind of standard of player you're looking into. But yeah, I think it's just interesting to think about the types of left back the club are considering, right? Because if Calafiori is on your list at 6'2", and with a kind of centre back hybrid education, but also the ability to play left back and invert. But then also on the longer list, Kerkez is there as well, who's essentially a kind of Cucurella clone. I think it shows you the kind of confusion around the club in terms of scouting those profiles, right? In terms of the upside for him, I think yeah, he kind of thrives in terms of interceptions and that kind of aggression. He's a bit taller than Cucurella, so maybe that's a kind of positive there. But yeah, I think it would be a very risky investment to look at someone like a Kerkez. I think all of the positive aspects of his game are in front of him and require development. So it would be a bit of a gamble play. So yeah, I think just in terms of how we're looking at this time of recording in the summer, it would probably fit in with more of the kind of potential squad that we seem to be building right now rather than a squad for the present. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting to pick out, especially yeah, given he's been starting with Hungary in the Euros as well.
Sam, any extra context or color commentary you want to add on Milos?
I'm just disappointed with Oli because when it came to upsides, he didn't say he felt he was hungry for more. Felt like that could have been a nice selling point, but
Sam,
yeah, I
back
think
to back
again,
pods with dad jokes here.
hey, somebody's got to add like, the face palms and, some kind of a level of humor. I mean, I admit it's not the best. The bar is very low, but I try. But yeah, I think Gurkesh is somebody I really like as well. In terms of just pure athleticism, probably rivaling Ben Chilwell at his heyday in terms of just being able to bomb up and down the flag. Doesn't really have the attacking tools, I would say, pointed out. He's very good in ground duels, not very good in the air. But if you want that kind of dynamism and to offer the 1v1 wingers a semblance of support that a lot of times, say, Mudrik hasn't received in the past couple of seasons, then you would look at somebody like a Gurkesh just by, you know, going by just how athletic he is, how he's able to just go towards the byline, offer those cutbacks and crosses. Then again, Maresca isn't somebody who allows that with his fullbacks. So that confusion again needs to be cleared up. But if you were looking at changing tack and going for a fullback who is able to offer you that, then at 20, with a lot of room to grow, he would probably be one of those players that I would be targeting. It's not an easy market left backs. Um, I've tried watching a lot of them, and the quality versus price disparity is quite staggering. And most of them are pretty diminutive, quicker left backs, not the ones who are aerially, tall and able to offer some level of aerial quality. So he's at least got the height. I really think that he could improve that just by virtue of having like a good frame. But there are not a lot of alternatives. So you've got Calafiori, who could cost you a bomb, and then you've got an athletic left back who's tall, can offer you something completely different. It's just which way do you want to go?
Well, I mean, that's fair. But 45 to 50 million euros, nothing to scoff at either. So it might be interesting. I'm really surprised, but like Bournemouth trying to flip this one as best they can. I mean, he came from the Dutch league, just a season ago at AZ Alkmaar. But he played 33 matches there, 28 in the Premier League. So they probably feel like if you want him, it's going to cost you something, because they probably, especially at Bournemouth's level and where they're going, is a good fit for where they're at and looking to develop. So interesting. But the last one we've got, and not a high note, gentlemen, is a goalkeeper. And this is more of like probably not the strongest link, strongest need, connection, things like that. But again, watch these players go from this tournament. These international tournaments will absolutely put the spotlight on players that probably would not have in other situations. But we've got Mamadarshvili, the goalkeeper, which is what's best. He's on the Georgian national team at Valencia, right? So he's in one of the top 5 leagues. He's 23. I don't know what you were doing in 2000, Sam, but Georgie was getting born. All right. Another young one. Fits the age profile, if nothing else, for these sporting directors.
Yeah, we've actually been linked with him in the past, and it's just after signing what 5, 6 goalkeepers now, there is obscurity in terms of why he would come in and what is the point really. But the last game I watched him, he was extremely like he was man of the match by some margin against the Czechs. He made 11 saves in that game. So in terms of shot stopping, having somebody who's 6'6" is obviously a big benefit to have. And he's not bad with his feet either. He's decent. He plays in La Liga, and Valencia sort of have some, insistence on being good with your feet. So he's not that bad. So I think in terms of looking at a pure shot stopper with some on-ball quality, you would definitely look at him. The problem being that his performances for Georgia are sort of pushing the price up. And as we all know, goalkeeping seems to be a premium position every season for one of the top clubs in the world. So uh, and they cost a lot too. If you want somebody who's 23 years old, he's effectively guaranteeing you, good performances for the next 6, 7 years. So you would want a big price for him. So I don't see this happening. Like Ollie said, we have far more urgent needs. Plus, I think the Ben Jacobs spot and even Matt Law sort of hinted that maybe Sanchez would be given a little bit of a boost in preseason to try and play that role. Obviously, having an ally in the coaching staff helps. Nepotism for the yay. But I don't think we have the money to spend, Brandon. I really, really don't. And I think like if you do have it, you should be spending it more wisely. So look to your 6 keepers, find 3 good ones and place them on the bench, like in terms of like increasing height, and then you're good to go.
Hey, that's fair, right? And I know in the keeps alone, that was something that a lot of Nick, Dan, and I really split on. Ollie was that goalkeeper position because Sanchez came in, then lost his spot through injury. Petrovic did, we think, well enough, but again, like the stature of where we want to be, I don't think anybody's 100% convinced that those two are like the final version of where we want to be. So it's good to be aware. I could see them doing something or sitting on their hands completely. Kepa's coming back. Sam, I can't believe you didn't bring that up, but there's already a lot going on, to Sam's point, in that department, Ollie.
Yeah, and I think this is like the context we need to think about all of these players, right? Is that there are so many unknowns right now. Like we've seen how the sporting directors are profiling players. We've seen them attack multiple players at the same time in terms of going for deals with uh, kind of various uh, success, sadly. And also, you just don't know what Maresca is going to kind of prioritize here, right? He's not through the door yet. And it's all well and good buying for a manager, but we saw how that went when kind of Tuchel, who was like 1 foot out the door anyway, got the go ahead to get like an Aubameyang or a Cucurella through the door late summer. And I wouldn't put it past Chelsea to go for a profile that is specifically asked for by Maresca in the late window. And that's why I think it's interesting to have a spread of players here, because you have a Calafiori who is a kind of niche left back who can invert into centre back here. And then you could play him alongside a Levi, Trev, Wes, and then Reese as right back, right? And allow Reese that freedom when Calafiori could dip in and make that back three. Like, does he want a new goalkeeper right now? Does he not trust the goalkeepers that are there? We'll find out in the first, I imagine, week or two, when he's like hard, like drilling these players over and over again asking them to play out from the back, right? Does he trust them with their feet? So if that's not the case, then we may go for a player like Mamadashvili, because Newcastle have been bidding for him. His performances with Georgia are driving the price up. That's probably going to put them off. They're going to want to drive that price back down again, because eventually, it's going to be the case that we know that he's going to be competition for Nick Pope, not necessarily starting over him, right? So, yeah, I think there's just so many unknowns to think about and so many moving parts, and we're not going to know the kind of definite profiles we're aiming for until maybe Maresca starts and talks a bit more about them, right?
Without a doubt. It's definitely interesting. When you put that together, I thought the whole point of the sporting directors that they would assemble a squad and then they'd find a manager to take the squad and do with it. But it's we're gonna find out a little bit more every season, Ollie. I don't know. We learn through decisions what the actual situation is. So we'll see. But Sam, is there anyone else that you're like, hey, here's the dark horse, here's the quiet one that people are missing out on?
Yeah, to be honest, goalkeepers are quite like good goalkeepers are easy to find. The problem is when I look at Maresca's time at Leicester and the quotes that were there, that sort of scares me a little bit. I'm not going to lie, because apparently he told Mats Hermansen, who was his goalkeeper there, that the moment you start playing long balls is the day I drop you. And I think that there's having a squad like Leicester's in the championship, and then with all due respect to the championship, their pressing isn't anywhere as intense or as aggressive as it is in the Premier League. So my first instinct is he rocks up in the PL with, even if we give him a first choice goalkeeper, there's going to be so much pressure that inevitably a goalkeeper is forced to play long. Even Edison is probably the only goalkeeper who has that license, because nobody wants to press Manchester City mindlessly, because you tend to give a lot of avenues to them. But that imperiousness in terms of we'll give you the time that you want only counts when you have a better squad than anybody else. And Manchester City have that privilege. I don't think Liverpool have that. I don't think any other goalkeeper has that. So I would say maybe earn that spot. In the first season, try to demonstrate that you have maybe a tier A asset instead of a tier S asset? And can you show glimpses of your coaching philosophy in terms of getting them to play from the back? And if next season you want that position to be improved, we'll back you 100%. But like Ollie said, it's probably unwise to straight away say, great, we'll go to Leicester and give you Hermanson, because then the questions will be how bad is shot stopping? How bad has that metric sort of dropped from championship to this? And are you compromising again? So just given the goalkeepers we have, it's not a priority position. I don't think Mamadashvili's upside on the ball is worth paying 50, 60, 70 million for. As he might be a supremely good shot stopper, but then why not just get Donnarumma in that case? So, just stick to what you have, trust Sanchez, and see what happens next season. Don't panic. Like, panic buys are the worst. And Ollie and I both are sitting after the Olise deal saying, here we go. Like, it's going to be Johan Bakayoko, or it's going to be, some obscure attacker no European team wants to touch with a 10-foot bamboo pole. And that's what happens when you miss out on your top target. So don't go into the market unless you're absolutely sure it's the S tier number one slot. Otherwise, leave it alone.
Yeah, I think
All
it's
right. Well,
it's quite a key point, right? Because we're talking about Project 2030, and part of that is developing the players you've already brought through the door, right? Like at a certain point, you've got to trust that the money you've invested in, an Enzo, a Moy, a Mudrik, a Kukurea, even Petrovic at the back, you have to allow them to develop and see the players that they become. We can't keep buying for the future and kind of neglecting the present, right? I think that's a really key thing here. Those that come through now, if they're going to be a backup to our starters and the ones we actually trust, we need to be able to count on them as soon as they hit the ground.
no doubt. No doubt about that for sure. So again, this is where we're at. This is what the crystal ball is telling us. We think is um, potentially realistic, at least on the list of the sporting directors' desks in terms of the Euros and how that might all play out. So again, as we continue to try to prep you, listener, as best we can ahead of the transfer window, we are doing the research, doing the homework, trying to strategize all the different ways we can. But that'll wrap us up. Again, Ollie, Sam, thank you both so much. Double duty this week. I promise I'll let you off the hook for the third one. I'm bringing in Matt Law. You guys can have the weekend off on me.
Too kind, too kind.
Right. Well, again, Sam, don't forget the dispatch. Any teas you've got on this one, since this pod will probably go out before the dispatch?
This is probably unprofessional, but thank you for reminding me I have to write it tomorrow. I've got a lot on my plate. I just had to like watch the Euros, watch the Copa, do research for this. I've been watching 4 players simultaneously, so it's quite hellish right now. But I promise I'll think of something.
Yeah. Well, hey, no worries. We've got a lot going on, especially with these international tournaments squished in at the same time. But it's fun, and I'm sure, especially for you, as you get to kind of assess all the different players that'll be next up. But anyways, listeners, that's going to wrap it. Got to get these two back to their personal lives. So we appreciate you as always. Go jump in the Discord, best Chelsea community around. Subscribe on YouTube. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.